My name is Lisa. I work at an art gallery downtown. It's small, quiet, and smells like paint and aged wood. My kind of perfect. I've always believed that art speaks louder than words, that colors can scream and silence at the same time. That's where I met him. He came in one rainy afternoon, tall and still, dressed in black with silver dusting his temples and a gaze sharp enough to cut glass. He didn't smile, didn't ask for help. He simply stood before grief in motion, a haunting abstract in red and gray, and stared at it like he could see something no one else could. I approached him, gently. "That one's by Adrian Sorel," I said, "painted during the hardest year of his life." The man looked at me, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "It feels honest," he said, his voice smooth and low, like something he couldn't say out loud. "I think that's what makes it beautiful," I replied. He nodded once. "Ethan. Ethan Caro." "Lisa," I said, shaking his hand. That was it. No sparks, no thunder, but something had quietly shifted inside me. Ethan began visiting the gallery regularly. At first, he claimed it was for the rotating exhibits, but eventually it became clear he was there for conversation, for me. We'd talk about everything: light, shadow, loneliness, silence. He was reserved but curious, charming but never loud, mysterious in a way that made me want to understand him. He told me he was a private art collector, that he traveled often but preferred the quiet life. I never asked where he got his money. It didn't matter then. Months passed, and one night, as I was closing up, he stayed behind. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked. I said yes. 2 years later, we were married. Our wedding was quiet, intimate, just like us. No big crowds, no fanfare. And then I moved into his house, our house, a massive estate tucked deep in the countryside, wrapped in ivy and silence. I remember stepping through the front doors, overwhelmed by the sheer size of it. Antique chandeliers, long hallways, so many rooms I lost count. "You live here alone?" I asked, only half joking. "I've always liked the quiet," he said. "I hope you will too." At first, I did. We had a routine: coffee in the garden, late-night talks in the library, weekend dinners with wine and classical music. Ethan was thoughtful, loving in his own quiet way. He brought me books about obscure artists, left handwritten notes on my pillow. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper. But he also never talked about his past. There were places in the house he avoided, rooms that remained locked, closets I was told not to open. It wasn't alarming, not at first. I figured it was just his personality. Some people need space. Until one afternoon. I was organizing books in the east hallway and stumbled into a part of the house I didn't recognize. There, hidden between two tall bookshelves, was a door I'd never noticed. Unlike the others, this one was reinforced with metal hinges and a keypad lock. I reached for the handle. It didn't budge. That night, while we were having dinner, I asked casually, "What's behind the locked door near the old study?" Ethan's fork paused mid-air. "That room," he said, slowly, "is off-limits." "Why?" "It's just something from my past. Nothing you need to worry about." He smiled, but it didn't feel warm. I nodded, said nothing more. But that door stayed in my mind, like an itch I couldn't scratch. The next morning, the lock had been changed. Shinier, stronger. And that was when I started to wonder, what was Ethan hiding behind that door? For a while, everything was perfect. Ethan was the kind of husband who made life feel gentle. He made me tea when I was tired, rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep, and kissed my forehead like I was something sacred. Our days flowed quietly, tenderly, filled with laughter, warm dinners, and classical music humming through the halls. And then we found out I was pregnant. 2 months in, and my belly had already begun to round beneath my dresses. Ethan was overjoyed, more than I expected. He started planning nurseries, researching baby names, reading parenting books late into the night. Watching him become a father, even in the smallest ways, melted something inside me. "I want her to have everything," he said one night, hand resting gently on my stomach. "She?" He smiled. "I can feel it. It's a girl." We were happy, truly. But the door never left my mind. The locked one at the end of the east hallway, the one Ethan had called off limits. At first, it was just a shadow in the back of my thoughts. Then it became a quiet curiosity. I began spending more time near the hallway, walking slower when I passed it, pressing my ear against the door. Sometimes I thought I could hear breathing on the other side, but I always told myself it was just the house, just old pipes or the wind. One afternoon, while Ethan was away for a business trip, he said he had to check on an estate in France. I wandered into his study. His keys were there, lying carelessly on the edge of his mahogany desk. I hesitated. Then I took them. I told myself I wouldn't open anything. I just needed to look, to understand, to stop the dreams. The key fit perfectly into the lock. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure the walls could hear it. The door creaked open, and a cold draft kissed my skin. The room was dim, lit only by the light leaking through the tall windows. And inside, hundreds of photographs lined the walls. They were all of one woman, dark-haired, pale-skinned, elegant. Her eyes were sharp and sad. In some photos, she was laughing. In others, she looked like she was being watched from afar. Every single image was perfectly framed, obsessively arranged. I walked deeper in. The air smelled of dust and old paper. There were articles pinned to corkboards, news clippings, police reports, printed emails. They all told the same story. Rachel Bennett, murdered by her husband. Child missing. Killer never found. One headline screamed at me. "Rachel Bennett, beauty slain in her own home." My blood ran cold. On a large table in the center of the room sat a worn leather journal. Ethan's handwriting curled across the pages. It was a diary. "I miss her every day. She was the only thing that made life make sense. I love you, Rachel." Rachel Bennett looked just like me. Was this Ethan's first love, the woman who came before me? Was this his shrine to a lost love? Was he still in love with her? A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to cry, scream, throw something, but instead, I stood still, shaking. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I froze. Ethan. He was home early. I scrambled to put everything back in place, locked the door, and tucked the key back into my pocket. I brushed my hands down my dress, took a deep breath, and forced a smile onto my face before heading downstairs. "There you are," Ethan said, stepping in with that calm smile of his. "Did you miss me?" I nodded. kissed his cheek, and clutched my stomach like the baby was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. I didn't say a word about the room. But now, I knew something Ethan didn't. I was no longer just his wife. I was a woman holding a question he had buried. And someday soon, I was going to dig for the answer. Rachel Bennett. I couldn't stop thinking about her since the day I opened that forbidden door. The photographs, the articles, the diary, everything screamed obsession. Ethan's obsession. I had to know who she was, so I dug deeper. The internet gave me pieces of the story, fragmented headlines and archived crime reports. Rachel Bennett murdered in her home. Suspect, husband Leonardo Bennett, still at large. Child believed to be abducted. The more I read, the more questions I had. Why did Ethan keep a shrine to this woman? One article mentioned Leonardo's close friend, someone named Thomas Granger. I searched forums, police records, even contacted old crime bloggers. It took me days, but I finally found an address linked to a man by that name, a small bookshop in the quiet part of town. I showed up one rainy afternoon, heart racing, unsure what to expect. "Thomas Granger?" I asked the man behind the counter. He looked up, surprised. A man in his 40s like Ethan, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes that softened when I mentioned Rachel Bennett. "I knew her," he said, "and Leo. And you look like her." I told him I was researching the case, that I was curious about what really happened. I didn't mention Ethan, not yet. Thomas invited me to sit in the back room of the shop where the scent of old paper filled the air. They were in love, he said, madly. Rachel lit up every room she entered, and Leo, he adored her. Then I hesitated, how did she end up murdered? Thomas shook his head. That's what I've never understood. The police say he did it, but I knew Leo. He was gentle, loyal. They had no problems, no fights, nothing. My skin prickled. We met again 2 more times. Each time, Thomas opened up a little more, sharing old stories, memories, even a photo of the couple. Rachel laughing, Leo looking at her like she was his entire world. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Back at home, Ethan was changing. He came home late. He didn't ask about the baby. And he had stopped smiling. One evening, as I set the dinner table, he stared at me with something cold in his eyes. "You've been seeing someone," he said flatly. "What? No. Ethan, Don't lie to me." He walked away, slamming the door to his study. My hands shook for hours. That night, I found something, a camera, hidden in a flower pot. Then I looked around for other places, and I just realized that this house is full of cameras. Ethan knew. He knew I had gone into the locked room. He knew about Thomas. He knew everything. I was no longer a wife. I was a prisoner. The next day, my phone vanished. Ethan began locking more doors, including the front gate. "You brought this on yourself," he said. "Curiosity has consequences." His voice was no longer soft. His eyes were no longer kind. And I was alone. Except for the baby, the only piece of peace I had left. Late at night, I would stand near the window, whispering into the dark. "I will get us out of here," I said, "somehow." And I meant it, because now I wasn't just running from lies. I was running for our lives. For weeks, I wasn't allowed to step outside. My phone, gone. The internet, cut off. Even the books in my room were replaced with dull, irrelevant novels, meant to distract, not inform. But I was not going to give up. I studied everything, the way the security system blinked at night, and slowly, quietly, I gathered keys. I was waiting for the perfect moment, and that moment came. It was a night like no other. The wind howled through the cracks of the windows, rain slashed against the glass like claws, and thunder shook the house to its bones. A storm. A violent, chaotic, beautiful storm. Ethan had left early that evening, claiming he had an emergency meeting in the city. The storm caused power outage. The backup generator failed to kick in. Just my luck. The house was swallowed in darkness. It was now or never. I slipped out of the bedroom, barefoot and trembling. The cold marble floor bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My hand clutched the ring of keys I had stolen over the past weeks. One of them had to work. I crept through the hallway, every step measured. My goal was clear: Ethan's study. It was the only room I had never entered. He had always warned me away from it. "It's where I manage my stock portfolios," he once said. "Too complicated and boring for you, love." But his eyes, even then, had flickered too fast, too sharp. It was a lie. I knew it. I reached the heavy wooden door and gently tried the first key. Click. It opened. I stepped inside. I turned on the light on the cell phone that I had gotten. It wasn't a financial workspace. It was something else entirely. One wall was covered with newspaper clippings, photographs, documents, but not about the stock market. They were about me. Me. Photos from the orphanage, from school, my first day with my adoptive parents, my high school graduation, even a blurry shot of me on a date in college. Tears welled in my eyes. There were dozens of photos, all pinned neatly, obsessively, in chronological order, detailed notes scribbled underneath, times, locations, dates. He had watched me long before we met. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Why? Why me? What did Ethan want?" I stepped forward, reaching out to one of the files that lay open on the desk. It was a detailed report, a profile of me, like I was a subject in some long-term experiment. I couldn't breathe. And then a horrifying thought crept into my mind like poison. What if Ethan was Leonardo? The man who murdered Rachel Bennett, the man who disappeared with their daughter, never seen again. Could he have changed his face? A new identity? Plastic surgery? I turned toward the mirror on the far wall and stared at my reflection. I had been told I looked like Rachel. Was that why he chose me? My heart pounded as the truth unraveled in my mind. What if I wasn't just someone he loved? What if I was her replacement? A second chance at a life he destroyed? I shook my head, stepping back from the desk in shock, my breath catching in my throat. And then, creak. A bookshelf near the far wall shifted with a mechanical groan. I turned off the cell phone light. I froze. I hadn't touched anything. I stepped back, pulse pounding in my ears. Was there someone behind it? Was Ethan home? "No," I whispered. "He's not supposed to be back until morning." The shelf slid further open, revealing a darkened passageway. A hidden door. The power was still out, no lights, just the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the narrow opening. I stood frozen, one foot in the study, one foot facing that black void. Something was in there, something that moved, or someone. Another flash of lightning, and then a loud thump. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the keys. Then, silence. Utter silence. But my blood screamed. "Ethan?" My voice cracked. He chuckled softly, stepping fully into the room, dripping water onto the polished wooden floor. "You thought I was at a meeting," he said, voice low and calm. Too calm. But the storm canceled everything. Lucky me, huh? My blood turned to ice. He pointed to a small, unblinking camera mounted high in the corner of the study. "Battery-powered, always on. You looked so curious, so desperate. I thought I'd let you explore before joining the fun." He walked slowly toward the desk, his shoes squelching with every step. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I could only watch. From the drawer, he pulled out a slim, worn folder. "You want the truth?" he said, tossing it toward me. "Here, go ahead, read." My fingers trembled as I picked it up. I hesitated, afraid of what I'd see, but I opened it anyway. The top page was a DNA analysis. 2 names were printed at the top: Rachel Bennett, Lisa Reynolds, and beneath them, in bold, 99% genetic match. I gasped. No, I couldn't be. Ethan's soft, eerie laughter echoed through the room. Surprised? I stared at him, my heart thundering. What? What does this mean?" He took a deep breath and walked in a slow circle, like a man about to confess to a priest. "I met Rachel when I was 14, he began. She was radiant, pure, and I was obsessed." He closed his eyes as if recalling a fond memory. "I followed her through high school, through college. Every day I loved her from a distance, until he came along." His voice darkened. "Leonardo." My knees nearly gave out. She loved him, Ethan spat. She chose him, even when I was always there, even when I gave her everything. And then they got married. Had a baby. He looked at me now, like he was looking at a ghost. "You." I covered my mouth with a trembling hand. "You have taken their lives," I whispered. "Didn't you?" He nodded. "Yes, I have taken their lives, dropped you off at a quiet orphanage, and made sure no one ever found out." Tears streamed down my face. I watched you grow, from afar, from behind glass. You became her, Lisa. You became Rachel all over again, and I, his voice dropped into a whisper, I fell in love all over again. I backed away, horror tightening around my throat. "You're insane." "I gave you everything," he shouted. "A beautiful home, a perfect life, just like I planned." Sirens suddenly howled in the distance. Police. Ethan's head whipped toward the window, his expression twisting. I steadied my breath. "I called them," I said, voice shaking, "before I entered this room, and I recorded everything." His eyes burned. "You little—" He bolted back toward the bookshelf. A hidden latch clicked, and the secret passage began to close behind him. "Ethan!" I screamed, running forward. But it was too late. He was gone. By the time police officers stormed the house, he had vanished into the maze of hidden corridors. No one could find him. It was as if the mansion had swallowed him whole. 3 months later. The hospital room was warm, bright, safe. I held my newborn daughter in my arms, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. She was all I had now, my only family, my miracle. The nurse smiled as she stepped out of the room, leaving me to rest. But when I woke up, she was gone. My baby, gone. A note lay where her blanket had been. 2 words, scrawled in Ethan's handwriting. She's mine. If you enjoyed this story or felt your heart skip a beat while reading, don't forget to check like this story, comment your favorite chapter or the moment that shocked you the most, follow me for more dark thrillers and plot twist-filled stories, share with your thriller-loving friends. Let's spread the chills, one secret at a time.